being filmed and to the use of images and sound recordings for a webcast and archive recording. The normal process at Scrutiny and Overview Committee meetings is to review and make recommendations to Cabinet by affirmation. Only those members of the committee present in the chamber will be able to move and second motions or affirm. However, members present virtually may speak in the debate. May I ask those who are joining us remotely to ensure that their cameras and microphones remain off unless they are addressing the committee. For those of us present in the room, please ensure that your microphone is close to you and speak clearly when addressing the room. Finally, a report of this meeting will be presented to Cabinet at its meeting on the 24th of March. I won't be able to attend that meeting, and neither will my Vice Chair. Is there any member of the committee that could attend that? Thank you, Councillor Bradnam, on the 24th of March. So we will move on. Do we have any apologies for absence?
We do, Chair. We have 3. This includes Councillors Richard Stobart, Helen Leeming and Sunita Hansraj.
Thank you for that. Do any members have any declarations of interest that they wanted to make clear before the meeting starts? No? Okay. If anything comes to mind during the meeting, please raise it as and when you see fit. So we will move on to the first substantive item, which is item 4, pages 5 to 10. South Cambridgeshire District Council's approach to digital delivery. Who would like to start on that? No.
Sorry, do we have a presentation from the officer at all?
No. Councillor Earl.
I was going to ask a wider question on this because there is an issue that there's been some dissatisfaction with ICT services that's evident in the report. And I would like to ask, ICT undertakes, 3C rather, undertakes some quite important services for the 3 councils in that it's ICT, buildings control and legal services for the 3. And I was wondering what external evaluation is carried out of this organisation, and also how do these report and subject to scrutiny, because we don't actually normally see any reports, and it's 3 major functions that 3C undertakes for the 3 councils. I was just wondering how that feeds in, because we haven't seen this in the past.
Thank you for that. Councillor Brian Milnes.
Oh, excuse me a second. I pressed the right button. Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've got various shared services, and for the governance aspects of that, which I think is what Councillor Earl is asking about, I think I'll ask our Chief Exec just to give an overview of how that's managed. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Liz Watts.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. You may recall, members, that last summer we renewed the partnership agreement for the 3C Council shared services. And just as we run a shared service for planning and waste for the City Council, Hunts runs the shared service for ICT and legal and building control for all 3 councils. We did a really thorough review of all of the services. We had independent consultants on legal and ICT. Building control we didn't, because it's an award-winning service and we felt it was functioning really well and we didn't need to sort of look into anything in any further detail. Following that, we did a huge amount of work. Sorry, it's 2024, because following that we did a huge amount of work in order to create for ICT the new role of the Chief Digital Information Officer that the 3 partners agreed to. And those reports will be presented to you or responded to tonight. So we did a lot of work for the 5-year partnership review. The shared services are overseen by one senior officer from each authority. So I'm the senior person from South Cambs, a director from Hunts and a director from the city, represent Hunts and the city. We meet regularly, we go through the performance reports, any kind of risk issues, any escalations. So there's strong oversight of the services. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Earl.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive.
Could we ask Councillor Earl to bring her microphone a bit closer? Thank you.
Is that better? I think thank you very much for that. It's very interesting to know that. So I'm taking it that the Shared Services Management Board reports back into Cabinet. Is that right?
Liz Watts.
Thank you, Chair. So there are lead members, and Councillor Milnes is one of our lead members for each authority. And it depends a little bit on what they're reporting, what is being reported. Occasionally there'll be a one-off report from a service, but it's led by a lead member from each authority.
Thank you for that. Councillor Earl.
Thank you, that's fine.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. I'll do the same. I am glad to see that item 2 on page 5 says it's recognised that digital will not be the best option for everyone. And I just wanted to alert us to the fact that for any individual population, even if some of those people, and the majority of those people are, as it says in the report, very digitally savvy, even those same people might become less digitally savvy as they become older. And that ability to be digitally savvy might vary according to where you are in the district or which demographic you're talking to. So I just want to be sure that we are maintaining a service that those people who are not so digitally savvy, of whatever demographic they are not excluded. And for example, just one thing, which I think the District Council does do, is if, for example, you are inputting information into a form, which will in due course be submitted, I believe my experience is that you get a read back of that before you do your final submission. So you get an opportunity to adjust anything if it doesn't look quite right. I say that because just recently I had to input, I regret to say, to a county council form where I was not given that opportunity. And indeed, accidentally, the person who was submitting it, which wasn't me, closed the window and lost all the information that we had just spent an hour putting in. So I just want reassurance, 2 things. One is that we enable people who are not digitally savvy to engage with the council in a meaningful way. And this more detailed point, that are all our web forms giving a bounce back to the user to make sure that what they're about to submit is as they would wish it to be.
Thank you for that, Councillor Bradnam. Councillor Brian Milnes.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'll pass shortly to Jeff because he references this specifically in the report before you today. And clearly it's very important that we don't have some sort of digital exclusion by making everything online and everything digital when a proportion, although it might be a smaller proportion increasingly, of residents are not comfortable with IT systems. So I think I'll just pass to Jeff to give you some more detail of that approach. Thank you.
Jeff Memory.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you're absolutely right, Councillor Bradnam. Even those people that are digitally savvy might have things happen in their lives where actually they don't want to do things online. People suffering from bereavement, people threatened by homelessness will often want to talk to somebody so that they can actually get that reassurance. And we're very, very conscious of that in the services that we provide. Hand in hand with providing these digital services, we're ensuring that our contact centre gets access to a wider range of information. So it's better able to help those people that phone up the contact centre or want to come in and see people at reception. That's always going to be an important part of what we do, and there's absolutely no plans whatsoever to move to an exclusively digital way of operating. And indeed, if you fill in a form, an e-form with us, you do get given that summary so that you can make sure that what you've said is correct. And again, we build that into every new form that we put online.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Brandon.
I believe Councillor Leeming, who can't be here, had raised some questions. Is that okay if I raise them?
Of course,
now?
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Councillor Leeming's questions related to the use of SAM. And she said, she asks, what determines what gets diverted through SAM, and at what point does it get directed to a human? And the case of bereavement is a good one. I've got two more after this. So.
Okay. Jeff Membry? Or... Yeah, Sonia?
I think Sonia's going to respond. Sonia Constant.
Thank you, Chair. So we have Sam Voice and we have Sam Chat. For Sam Voice, we listen to what the question is. If the question is programmed into the system, Sam will answer, and usually that's to signpost to digital services. And at the end of that journey, the customer is offered the opportunity to speak to an agent. However, if Sam if it isn't programmed, then the customer will go straight through to an agent. From a chat perspective, Sam Chat always tries to answer the question, and if the customer asks to be put through to an agent during office hours, then they are put through.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
One of the points if I may add into that, was that from my own experience, there's a point at which Sam says, and I recognise that Sam is doing a triage, and Sam then says, I'll transfer you to the relevant people, and you think then you are speaking then to people in, let's say it's homelessness or something, and so you start to speak as if you're talking to somebody in homelessness, and then the person answered me saying, "Excuse me, just to hang on a minute. I'm in the customer contact centre," and I thought that's not what Sam told me. So I think it would be helpful if in the script it indicates whether they are actually diverting you to the people in the relevant department, or if they're diverting you to the customer contact centre, because I appreciate people in the customer contact centre can answer quite a lot of questions, but it might be that the particular question I, as a counsellor, was asking might be best directed to the actual department. I'm not saying that the people in the customer service centre couldn't, but often when we as counsellors ring up, it's often with a really particular query. So that's my extra bit on that little question.
Can I just add to that, to Councillor Bradnam's point about whether it's like, is it clear that you are speaking to an AI bot essentially, opposed to a human? So I think that was raised by another councillor as well. You know, are the public clear that they are talking to an AI bot? Is that in the script? Jeff Membry, yeah.
Yes, indeed. It's always made clear that the public are speaking to an AI person, and that's why it offers to put you through to a real person if necessary. In the case that Councillor Bradnam was referring to, actually, you contacted me about that, and perhaps I didn't explain the situation well enough. What actually happened, Sam did put you through to the housing department, but it was out of hours. So out of hours ran what they referred to as a contact centre, but actually was just an initial triage point. So actually Sam did do what it said it was going to do, although I think we recognised that that was probably, the way the phone was answered was probably confusing, because I think they used the word contact centre, didn't they?
Okay.
In that case, but actually what Sam did was correct.
Okay, right, so I've
Councillor
got
Bradley.
two more, sorry, from Councillor Leeming. How and where is the info that Sam uses, or indeed retrieves, stored? Because I think Councillor Leeming was concerned about whether that was secure.
Deaf memory.
Yes, Sam doesn't store any personal information. If somebody is using the web chat facility, then Sam gets its information from our website. So everything on the website is safe and secure, so we know that Sam is being safe and secure. If somebody telephones and speaks to Sam on the phone, what's happened is we identified the 10 most common reasons that people call us for every service, and we trained Sam to answer those questions. And again, it doesn't store any personal details, so that it's safe. We keep monitoring why people are calling us, and our contract with the company that we're using is such that if we identify the need to train Sam on something new, either we can do that ourselves or we can refer it to the company to train someone on that, depending on how complex that is. But we keep that under regular review.
Okay, thank you. And the other question is, does Sam learn from itself, or is it bespoke for us?
Deaf memory.
The answer is both. As I said, we can train Sam on specific things, but it does learn. So it learns from the way people respond to the questions that it's asked, and it slowly evolves. We tend, for understandable reasons, to be a bit cautious, because obviously it's really important that we give people the correct information. But in small incremental steps, Sam will definitely learn from the questions that is being asked.
And if I may, Chair,
Please.
Jeff and I and others have had several conversations about the accuracy. You'll know with other AI interfaces, it often now has a rider at the bottom that says information may not be accurate. This AI may make mistakes. What we've gone with is a much safer option, which is to use our own information and website as the source material for what Sam delivers, and it's much less prone then to make mistakes.
Thank you for that. That's useful. Councillor Bradnam.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much for those answers.
Okay. Councillor James Hobray.
Thank you, Chair. So I had a few initial comments and several questions, and I'm happy I'm happy to split them if necessary, of course.
Yes.
So my first comment really is that I'm very pleased that we're seeing this report. If we get all of these things right, I can see there's a huge amount to gain in efficiency for us as a council, and in improving our services in lots of different ways. And this is clearly partly because some people will hugely appreciate the speed advantage of using online systems when they're really good. And the automation behind that can save us a lot of time and help us be much more efficient in the way we deliver our services. Alongside that, if we cater properly for the non-tech savvy users, we should be able to get the best of both worlds. So I'm very pleased to see this report. My second comment about it is that the list in paragraph 2, I think, is extremely good. It lists the services should be user-centred, data-driven, iterative and agile, automated where possible, end-to-end. I think this really has captured what we should be trying to do. So I just wanted to compliment the authors on those 2 points. So my first question was really a very basic one. How are we defining digital delivery here? Because the word digital can be used to mean a range of different things. It seems to me that it could refer purely to our online interface to residents. It could refer to that plus some back-end systems that are used in relation to the online interface. It could be used to refer to that, all of that plus more back-end systems that are used by officers, including AI systems, or it could be an even broader definition that includes a wider range of IT services, or even all of our IT services. You know, digital is used in the industry to mean any of those things. So I wanted to check, in terms of the scope of this kind of report, how are we using this word digital? Are we being rigorous about what it means, where we use it? And I think it's important to make sure that, to avoid confusion, so if we're using it in different ways in different places, that could be confusing. So that's my first question. Is it okay if I stop
Yeah,
there
let's
for now?
take that first, I
Thank
think.
you.
I
Brian,
think it's a perfectly reasonable question, because as Councillor Hobrow points out, we use digital in many places with different connotations. And indeed, we're going to be talking about the Chief Digital Information Officer who's with us now, and what went into producing a requirement for a digital officer that encompasses effectively all we do in that domain. So, in fact, I'll pass on to either Jeff or Simon to talk about whether or not we're a little bit too loose with that, and it's effectively a generic term, or whether it's fairly accurate because it's such a broad area of the work that we're doing. Thank you.
Jeff Memory.
Yes, thank you. A really good question, actually, and it's a question that we've asked ourselves a few times. In terms of this report, it's very much centred on our interface with the public, but actually that's because that's where we started out. That's how we started thinking, where can we get the best benefit for our residents? But the discussion's now moving on. We're certainly we're talking now about other things that we can be doing internally. Highlighted the opportunities for efficiency that you've pointed out there, and how that's going to impact on services internally. In future, I will be sure that when I do a report, I put a little note at the beginning saying how I'm using the term digital. So I'll accept a gentle slap on the wrist on this occasion.
Councillor Hogarth.
Thank you. I think it is good to be clear in each report what the context is for the purpose of the report, because it is in particular a term that has so many slightly different uses. Thank you very much. So my next question was about item 5, about decisions made by AI systems. And when I read that, then the question that came to my mind was, actually, do our AI systems make any decisions? Or are they assistants that help us as members of this council to make our better decisions and to make them more effectively? So the way that the report reads in number 5, it does rather imply that AI systems are making some decisions. So I just wanted to probe on that. I'm slightly surprised if the AI systems are directly making any decisions, but it kind of depends on what you regard as a decision. So yeah, I just want to probe a bit more in where the boundary is there. Thank you.
Jeff Memory.
Yeah, you're right that it does depend upon how you define decision. Some processes can result in a decision notice being issued. For example, if somebody wanting to claim a single person discount, the process is a straightforward process, but at the end you do get a decision notice. Now that can be automated, and I think has been automated here. What it doesn't do is where a human, or you have to exercise judgment in order to make a decision. We don't do that at the moment. I mean, in the future, who knows? But at the moment, it potentially can make decisions where the process is wholly automated, and you just go 1, 2, 3, 4, but not where any judgment's needed.
Councillor Hobro.
Thank you. So I suppose I'm just looking for a little more reassurance in this item, because I can see that there's the possibility of some creep where automated systems start making the kinds of decisions that perhaps our residents might not be totally happy with. So I just felt a little uneasy reading that. and just would like it to be quite clear what kind of decisions are always made by, or judgments are always made by people in the council, and what sort of thing gets delegated.
Councillor Brian Mills.
Yes, I just wanted to refer to the somewhat innovative work that we're doing in the planning service, because one of the things that we've done there is to look at what is able to be done automatically by AI systems. And it's a case in point that actually a lot of the initial application data that is collected and submitted by an applicant is very straightforward to then check what's been supplied and whether it meets the criteria and so on. So in that sense, there's a decision-making process that can be done. And it's part of the work that we were doing with Liverpool University, I think, or some. Perhaps I can, if is it Sonia that's dealing mostly with that? Okay. So, but I hope that gives you an idea of the work that we're doing, and that we've got very much this in mind, because clearly it can make for a much more efficient service if we can automate that and reliably do so.
Okay. Councillor Howbray.
Yeah, so thank you. I mean, that is giving me more reassurance. I think it's an area we're going to have to keep watching to make sure that we don't accidentally cross any of the kinds of boundaries that would start to cause concern. Is it okay if I ask the other two questions?
Please.
Thank you. So my third question was about, so it's paragraph 11, and it's about e-forms. So the one complaint that I get a lot about e-forms from the people who submitted them is that they're a bit like a black hole. So let's say somebody puts in a report of a suspected breach of planning, or a report of some fly tipping or something like that. That's the sort of thing that goes in via e-forms. At the moment, you get an email back with your submission, and you have a code, but often there is no feedback. I mean, if something is acted upon, then the person who submitted it might get an email, but they might not. And I'm often given these codes by people who submitted something saying, oh, well, has anything been done? So this brings me to my question. Is it possible to improve the feedback mechanism that people get when they submit these e-forms? Now, I expect that this is a very difficult request, because I totally understand that the e-forms are a very simple, thin layer which allows information to come in to a particular department, and that there are lots of different back-end systems involved. And I'm not expecting that there will be an easy way to improve this. However, I would like to suggest that ideally anyone submitting a complaint or a request like this would like to have some kind of status on that request to see, first of all, how long is it sitting in the queue before it gets looked at by anyone? Secondly, the point at which someone is actually dealing with it. Thirdly, whether or not a decision is made on whether the request should be actioned, all that sort of thing. So yeah, is there, so this is a slightly rambling introduction to my question. Do we have any plans to move in that direction from the current e-form system? Because I think there's scope for a lot of improvement there, but I accept that it could be difficult.
Jeff Membry.
The answer is yes. That's the short answer. The slightly longer answer is that's already in place for some already, where you can track things through the portal, our customer portal. For others, it's a little bit more complicated. As you've identified, some of our back office systems have, I never remember what APIs stand for, but the links between two systems. Councillor Milne is is keen to tell me. Where they're available and where it's cost effective to do the work, we do plan to do that work. One of the challenges that we have is it does take quite a lot of resource that we need to put into that. Now, if we're getting hundreds or thousands of those type of forms coming through to us every year, and the APIs in the back office system means that that can be done. Yes, we will certainly be looking at doing that. If we have like 12 a year and it's in a back office system with very poor APIs, it's unlikely we'll ever get round to that sort of link. But I think, as you're rightly saying, it's not good enough to just make e-forms available. That will suit some people, but actually what we need to be focusing on is delivering a better customer experience to make it easier and better for people to be able to do that. And that's certainly something that we're very, very focused on, but we need to be realistic about where we can do it and where it probably wouldn't be worth our council taxpayers' money investing in that area.
Great.
So I'd just like to add to that. So in terms of workflow management, which is really what the process we're talking about here, it's an iterative process to develop a system that responds effectively and gives notifications and chases and hands out reminders to the operatives that they've got work to do, and so that you've got some visibility of that for everybody that's involved. And I think you know, we've done a lot of good work linking front ends to different back ends through the API that Jeff's just been talking about. And the technology behind that is increasing as well, so or improving, and we'll be able to take advantage of those improvements ourselves in time. Thank you.
Councillor Hobro.
Thank you. So, I mean, as I said in the question, I understand that some of these things are difficult. I really wanted to highlight it because I think there's a real opportunity to improve the customer experience here. May I ask the final question?
Please.
Thank you. So this comes back to the question Councillor Braddon raised about SAM, and it's really quite similar. And it's based on my experience of using other organisations' AI assistants. Sometimes they can be deeply frustrating, and sometimes they can put you into what seems like an infinite loop from which there is no escape. So really, I wanted to check that our system never does that. Is it always possible to do something like pressing 0, or you know, is it always possible to get out of the loop and to be transferred to a human if the person inquiring is just feeling at the end of their tether and isn't getting on with the AI system?
Thank you for that. Jeff Memory.
Yes, indeed. We were very conscious of that because you're right, there's been some quite high-profile cases where these sort of things have happened. I'm always reluctant to say that can never happen because in the world of IT, it sets out to prove you wrong. But the default that we've got is if Sam thinks anything's wrong at all, it puts somebody through to the contact centre. I think if it's 5 seconds silence, it'll put somebody through to the contact centre. So it's unlikely, but I think the proof of the pudding is we've had over 30,000 calls fielded by SAM that haven't gone through to the contact centre, and we've had a handful of complaints, and those complaints have not been of anything significant, although we do monitor them. So it has a really good success rate, and it's something we're very, very conscious of. We also, I don't think we've had a single complaint where somebody said Sam hasn't understood their accent, which has, I know, been an issue in other areas. We haven't had that.
Thank you for that, Councillor.
So thank you. That's very reassuring. I mean, I'd comment that if we keep making sure that option is open, then in the rare occurrences when Sam just can't cope, then it will always make sure that it's possible to get through to a human. But also it'll give us some very useful data. If the number of people who are going through that scenario goes up, then it starts to show us that there's something that is causing problems. So that's very reassuring. I've asked enough questions, so thank you.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you for that. Okay, so we'll move on to Councillor Richard Williams.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Just got a few points I wanted to make. Some quite report-focused and processing, and others on more substantive issues. Just going back to the AI point, I think it's a really interesting discussion. Could we be transparent, and I think it probably is important that we are transparent, about which decisions are being taken by AI. So at least somewhere residents can find out actually what AI is doing and what AI is not doing. Related to that, can I ask, is there always a real person who has sort of overall responsibility for potentially reviewing those AI decisions, which I think is important, even if they appear very mechanical? If it keeps making a mechanical error, is there a real person whose job it is to oversee what's happening? And just a very specific question. So on the subject of planning, I get very, very twitchy whenever AI getting involved in planning is mentioned. But something like, for example, something which has cropped up in my casework this week, redaction of documents. Is that something that AI currently does? Or is that something you would put in the category, which personally I think where it definitely should be, of judgment, and something that would always need to be done by a human being? I did have some then more processy questions about the report.
Let's take those first, I think, and then we'll come back. Jeff Membry. Yeah.
Yes, certainly. I mean, we talked a little bit about decisions earlier on. Actually, those decisions are normally, again, definitions being important, and not normally AI decisions. They're just an automated process. I can't think of a single decision that's made in the council that's made by AI. AI is primarily used at the council for summarising documents and gathering that sort of information. But I will go and check with colleagues in the planning department to specifically check on the redaction point that you're making, Councillor Williams, because I must admit, I don't know the answer to that, and my colleagues don't know the answer to that, so I'll find out and feed that one back to you. But I can, again, reassure, I think, members of the committee that we will default on the side of caution when it comes to looking at whether something could be considered to be a decision that's made by AI. We'll always go with no, AI won't make that decision. There's, again, I think Simon might know more than I on this area, but there's certainly a legislative requirement that where any decision is made by AI, there has to be a right of appeal to a human, and the person receiving the decision must be notified that the decision was made by AI, and they've got a right of appeal to a human. So we should not end up in a position where AI makes a decision and the person that receives that decision isn't aware of what's happened or what their appeal rights are. There's nothing more to add to that, and I think that's...
Councillor Mills.
I think it might be just worthwhile differentiating between a broader AI categorisation and robotic process automation, which is taking a process and replicating what you would do as a person by the system doing it itself. And there's no decision making for it to do, it just goes through a process. And one of the advantages of the technology that we're adopting is, of course, that actually frees up time of real agents to do judgmental work, to use their knowledge of the way systems work to put an extra layer of capability into the system. So the straightforward stuff gets done automatically, and then it passes over to humans for their intervention.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mills. I will come back to Councillor Williams. So just on that point, Councillor Mills, so, and I don't understand it very well in terms of how much AI is delivering. So in terms of if we had, say, a planning application and a report was delivered on planning application X, I get there will be some repetitive things in there that could be checked against documents, but it might be that some of that report is delivered by AI, I suppose, for the planning officer, although they are making the decision on that. So they might say, well, AI has delivered a report to say that it's checked against X, Y, or Z. Would that be made clear that AI has done that bit of the report or whatever, or would it not, because ultimately the officer is signing it off, or it could be a council member looking at something that they've maybe I've read too much into that, but yeah. So could you comment on that? Or
Okay, I'm not sure that we are drifting into an AI workshop.
Yeah.
And we're all developing systems. So, for example, I know officers generally are using AI to help. For example, one of my own cases, putting a proposal together for a customer, for a client, and getting AI to produce a framework of that document, and saves me, considerable amount of time in doing so. And then I edit it as if it's been produced by, my careful assistant. And it can make mistakes. And so the importance of that interaction between an AI-generated content and what you can do personally is a way of thinking about the system quite usefully, I think. But I don't know whether Simon, Jeff want to add anything to what we're actually doing now, but this is all a developing process for the entire world. And watch out for what's coming in the next few years.
Chair, may I make a brief comment to this point? I think my question earlier about definitions is relevant here, because the term AI is not very well defined. So I think when we use AI here, we're talking about large language models, and we're talking about using a large language model to summarize information and produce a summary which is then consumed or incorporated into a report. AI might also refer to machine learning algorithms, and sometimes it's used even to refer to very mechanical automated systems, but probably not. And I think there probably is room for some clarity on what we mean when we say AI in these reports. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'll come back to you now, Richard Williams. Sorry,
thank you. Well, just on that point, then I'll move on to my other points. But I mean, it's probably not a topic for today because we're getting off the point of this report. But I think that raises a lot of questions about informal use of AI. To give an example, summarising objections to a planning application. It would worry me if ChatGPT or similar was being used to summarise public objections, because what is that AI picking up, and then it just becomes a fact. So I think maybe there may be more work to do on the sort of informal use of it and guidelines around the informal use of it. But that's probably off the point today. Just going back to the report, I had some more sort of specific points just about the drafting of the report. I mean, obviously, I thought it was a really interesting, well put together report. I wasn't quite sure where it was going though, whether it was a sort of policy statement or whether it was a performance report. So it wasn't quite clear to me what the purpose of it was, because it seemed partly a performance report and partly a statement of overall principle, but not especially detailed in either. So, for example, under paragraph 17, page 8, the red box, it gives some data, interesting data actually, about the number of calls that Sam has fully answered. It says between 27 and 31, reducing waiting times at the call centre. If we're going to present that data, it would be really interesting to see that data in much more detail. So to set, the use of Sam against average call times. So we could see if as, the use of Sam goes up, average call times go down. This is interesting, but I think there's probably a lot more data that we could put together if we're fully reporting back to Cabinet or whoever on the impact this is actually having on service delivery.
Thank you for that. Councillor Mills.
Certainly in terms of understanding the relationship between offload of processes in our KPIs, I'm sure Kevin wants something else to give consideration to. He's the officer that pulls together our KPIs. And I think there would be value in understanding that. And as we're hinting at, I think, at the moment, we're talking about, at the moment, primarily about augmentation of our workload with AI tools, rather than AI replacing what humans and our officers do. So I think it's worth bearing in mind that, and I think actually we're on a small language model in terms of our SAM. So Councillor Holbrook talked about large language models, but we're avoiding doing that, so we maintain the accuracy of the answers. It may not give as complete an answer as an independent AI system might do, but we know that what we're doing is based on our own information rather than collected from elsewhere. So we don't get that problem of degrading data sets, which you can get from more open AI systems. So I hope that's useful. But yeah, I think this, it's novel to all of us, this entire arena. And suggestions to make sure that we monitor how we're progressing in this field is definitely important. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Williams, did you have anything else?
I'm done, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Fain, did you want to still come in? You're indicating to speak online.
Thank you, Chair. The question I was going to ask is one of the questions which was asked by Councillor Bradnam earlier on.
Thank you for that. Okay, we'll move on. Councillor Stephen Drew.
Thank you. Within point 10 on page 6, this has been referenced by a couple of other councillors already, but within point 10 it says that it reduces demand on alternative channels, and we also reference around that point as well the reducing the time for call centre waiting. Do we have data which specifically shows that?
Jeff Membry?
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yes. We again, correlation is not always causation, but we've got data that shows a strong correlation between reductions in calls going through to the contact centre and reducing waiting times. Again, be happy to bring a more detailed report to a future scrutiny committee if that would be of interest.
I think so, because building on what a couple of colleagues have already said, and I think relating to Councillor Richard Williams' point about it being both the presentation of information but also a position paper, effectively. This point number 10 here on page 6 is making a very clear and definite claim, for want of a better word. And I use the word claim at this point because, as I've just asked in that question, it is making a statement without necessarily giving the supporting data for that being the case. And I think that's really important because it seems very clearly that the District Council is arguing that the move towards this approach to supporting residents is the right move and the right approach to take. But that's obviously got to be backed up by the evidence of doing it. And I don't doubt that evidence exists, but I think if that statement is going to be made. If I can go back into point 10 again, and I think this doesn't just come from point 10, but it comes from others. Are we replacing human workers with AI?
I think I'll ask Jeff to confirm. My answer to that would be no. In our previous point, I talked about augmentation. So this is currently, at any rate, a tool that is allowing us to be more efficient in terms of the human work, human element. As far as I'm aware at the moment, that's all we're imagining that we would do. However, clearly, as developments in AI more widely come to the fore, it may be that they are able to replace much more of an employee's task during the day. And so that's a wider discussion perhaps about AI and its future. So, but I don't know if Jeff's got anything to add to that.
I mean, what you said is exactly right. The focus on digital, not just AI, has been to provide a better service to our residents and for us to be more efficient. In the long term, being more efficient might mean that we have opportunities to reduce costs. And in some areas, we've found that we've been able to support teams in generating additional income, for example, which is beneficial to the council. Hopefully that gives you an answer. It isn't a case where we can say, well, we've introduced Sam into the contact centre, therefore we've lost a contact centre member of staff. But as our digital work continues to expand and we can deal with more work, potentially it does give us the opportunity to make efficiencies.
Okay, if I can move to point 17 on page 8. In the red box, as was referenced earlier, 4 lines on the bottom, it says SCDC's AI voice assistant Sam has worked well for SCDC and was around 20% of the cost alternative solution. What is the alternative solution?
I'm not sure it would be appropriate to name the solution in public.
I mean, is the alternative solution people? Is
No,
the alternative
this was
solution
an
external company? Is the alternative solution a call centre? What is, in principle, the alternative solution?
The alternative solution was an alternative AI assistant that's used by other councils.
Okay, that's fine. That moves that question in a different direction to where I thought it was going. Thank you. If I can pull back up then to point 9 on page 6. In the last sentence, it says, retaining in-house expertise reduces reliance on external support and helps the council manage ongoing change more effectively. I'm always intrigued by statements such as this, not because I necessarily think it's wrong, but I am just as likely to read something in a different report, which may not be about this, in which the use of an external support group, agency, company, expert, consultant will be, quite rightly, promoted as a good thing, because it is. But here, we are arguing that retaining in-house expertise reduces reliance on external support. So in this regard, we are making a point that having less reliance on external support is a good. So why is reducing reliance on external support a good in this situation?
Jeff, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right that it depends what situation you're talking about. And perhaps I could have been clearer here. What I'm talking about is a like-for-like alternative. So rather than having an in-house person working, rather than having an external person working 9 to 5 doing a specific task, we've got an internal person working 9 to 5 doing a specific task at a lower cost, and also giving us more opportunity to share that expertise with other members of the team. Now, you're absolutely right. There will be situations where actually an external provider can provide something that would be more costly to provide in-house. A really good example is where you need 24-hour support. Now, that's often cheaper to go to an external provider who has the scale to manage to monitor things on a 24-hour basis. But what we're talking about here is what would just effectively be exactly the same person, or exactly the same role being undertaken, but by an external person at a higher cost.
Okay, so to take that a bit wider in that regard, how do we know that the skills and expertise that the 3C service provides in this incredibly fast-moving and complicated area of IT, for the want of a wider phrase, how do we know that those people who we employ internally to produce this service are keeping up with the fast-moving and fast-changing development that I would state would clearly be the case for those working on this kind of thing in the private sector?
This report is primarily about our digital delivery team within South Cambs rather than 3C ICT. But we're actually very active nationally in ensuring that we're monitoring what's happening around digital delivery across local authorities as a whole. Sonia's been invited to speak actually on a number of government organised panels to talk about how digital delivery can improve local authorities. We've got a network that we're building, not only with local authorities, but with those people that provide services for local authorities. One of the things, again, I'm not wanting to talk for Simon, but one of the things that Simon's looking to introduce in the longer term is bringing in potential providers to give us some of that blue sky review of the things that are happening and look at potentially what might be for benefits for us longer term. And we're also working with Cambridge University, something called AI It Counts, where actually we've put forward some proposals that where if we get the agreement of Cambridge University, we'll get, I think it's £25,000 to help fund that, plus the support of an academic from the university to ensure that actually what we're trying to do is done using the best available technology for us. So you're right, it's a lot of work, and I've never known, I mean, perhaps I'm getting a bit old for this, but I've never known technology to be changing at the sort of rate that it's changing at the moment. So Sonia and her team put a lot of work in ensuring that we've got that networks with other people. And so far, we've done well, but it continues to be a big piece of work for us.
Councillor Brian Mills, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, in my own experience of going back to the 90s, where outsourcing became a very popular trend. So companies and other large organisations decided that managing their IT infrastructure was beyond them as an organisation, and what they would go to a third party who would give them very attractive offers for the first 3 years of their operation, and in year 3, all of a sudden the cost per year went up dramatically. They got nowhere to go. All the stuff had been tupied across, and we lost that in-house expertise. So, but there are still opportunities in here, and you're right, there is a distinction with what's in here that we're talking about, local capability, our own internal capability, and what, by comparison, can be offered by an organisation that specialises in one particular area, that can give 24/7/365 support, which is required in a lot of cases. And we'll come on to discuss perhaps in more detail later. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing, and I think what we're saying, is that as well as the council looking to lead in the use of this digital communication with residents and provide the best possible services through the use of the digital delivery service, it is also being done in a way that is completely open-minded and is a constant learning experience. So I have one more thing that I'd like to go for. When I go to a supermarket, I might go to Morrison's in Camborne, where I live, and that's where I went yesterday. And then today I went to Tesco, and tomorrow I might choose to go somewhere else. What word would you use to describe me when I have made a choice about which service I use, and I have complete freedom of choice in which service I use within the marketplace? What word would we use to describe me?
Okay, that's a question I hadn't anticipated, and clearly by the look on the faces of my colleagues here, neither are they.
Need to choose.
Indiscriminate.
I have freedom of choice. I am therefore within the marketplace a customer. Do I have freedom of choice as to which council I speak to about paying my council tax?
No.
Do I have freedom of choice as to which district council level provider I'm going to use when I wish to use the waste service that comes to my house? Right. There is clearly a deliberate decision on the part of the council to refer to those who use its services as customers. why. Why are people who have no choice about which service they use, for what reason are they referred to as customers? Since customer implies choice. Why are they not referred to as...
That's not necessarily true,
Okay.
I would contend, Councillor Drew. I think the answer to your question is we have customers because we're providing services to them. Some of those services, building control, for example, they do have opportunities to go elsewhere. So it's not really as straightforward a choice or not a choice as you've described.
So when I contact the council about my council tax, how am I a customer? The reason I'm pushing at this is that there is a huge talk in here about service delivery, and there is huge reference to excellence in service delivery. There is clearly excellent work going on. I suspect that my take on this will not be something that will be agreed with by those who are choosing the language, and that's absolutely fine. As Councillor Mills has just pointed out, there are ways of looking at it. What I would just like to make the point of is this. I think it's incredibly important for us to remember that in relation to a large amount of the work that we are referencing within this report, the residents of South Cambridgeshire have no choice who to go to. And it is incredibly important that we remember that somebody contacting us about council tax or waste service is a citizen. They are a resident of South Cambridgeshire. They are not me choosing which supermarket to go to. And whilst I absolutely recognise that the public service values are crystal clear in here, and the work that is being done in relation to digital delivery and AI as described by those giving answers does represent really high quality work, I would just like to make the point that the use of the word customers to describe people who have no choice about interacting with the council does from time to time need to be reflected upon, and does from time to time need to be remembered that whilst, as Councillor Mills has rightly pointed out, those who choose to build houses or choose to whatever can legitimately call customers, there is a distinction between that and other people who are using their government and their services. Okay.
Thank you for that. So we'll move on to Councillor Paul Bearpark, please.
Thank you. Probably just going to cover, just in a little bit more detail, some of the things that other people have asked about, particularly Councillor Hobro. Obviously, there are going to be big opportunities in the future for taking advantage of some of the new technologies that are being developed. I mean, an example at the moment would be agentic AI. But obviously these things come with risks. Just wondering if you could kind of give me if I could just understand a bit better what the processes are that the council goes through when it's deciding whether to introduce new technology, and also in those processes what oversight is in there. Just because obviously the risks are that things get introduced kind of accidentally. There was something actually in section 13 that said you do things on a small scale first, and then you test them and roll them out. I just wondered, that's obviously one example, whether there are other examples of processes that kind of everybody's working towards to kind of manage those risks.
Councillor Jeff Membry.
Yes. If I use AI as an example, we have an AI policy whereby before we can use any AI, there has to be an application through to our information governance group. It's compared to a register of systems that we have that have been proven to be secure and safe to use. The contractual information is checked to see who remains the owner of the information, what information is stored and where it's stored, because we like to keep everything within the council. And we only use AI in those circumstances where we've got that reassurance. So we're certain about the provider, we're certain about the security of your system, and we're certain about the security of where the information is stored, not stored in the United States of America, for example. We have similar processes that apply to any other part of digital systems that we're buying. So we very carefully review the contracts. We get advice and support from information governance in 3C, and we ensure that we're only using things that we know are safe. And as I said before, we know that if we were to give somebody access to our network, the potential would be quite frightening. So we always default on the side of safety. And as Councillor Mills said, that can mean that sometimes private sector companies can offer technology that's a bit whizzier than what we're offering, because we always choose the safe option. But we think that's the right thing to do for our customers. Sorry, you shouldn't say customers, I should say residents.
I think we've agreed that we agree to disagree on the word. You can continue to use whatever word you choose.
Councillor Paul Bear-Park.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that. I think I just wonder whether it might have been useful, and maybe for the report to Cabinet, whether some kind of overview of that, that process, that control is added to the report. If there's anything that can be, I don't want to create a whole load of work, but if there are some summaries of that somewhere that could be introduced into the report, that would be quite helpful, because I think that's quite important. That's our main; those processes are our main way of mitigating the risks.
Councillor Brian Mills.
I think Councillor Beppart raises a good question for us over non-authorised use of AI tools elsewhere, for example. So we've talked about other AI systems, so whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini from Google. All of those tools are available to all of us at any time. Now, if we started to have officers, our staff, using those tools, and it was inaccurate responses that were coming back in using those tools, then we'd expose ourselves to some risk. I don't know quite where that, whether we've got mechanisms in place to avoid that or not. So
yeah, with 3C do keep use under review. I think just to make the point that this report is requested by Scrutiny and is just coming to Scrutiny. It's not going on to Cabinet.
Thank you for that. Councillor Paul Bear-Park, did you have anything else? Yeah. And I'm reassured by what Councillor Mills says about at the end of the day, there's still officer or councillor oversight over these things. That, we may be using them for information, in whatever means, but, ultimately we've still got oversight over that and accountability, whether it's someone's work or representing a resident, whatever it might be. Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. So I think we've got one more speaker, Councillor Heather Williams, and then we will move on to the next agenda item. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. I would endorse some of what has been said by other members, particularly around residents and not customers. I think there is room for both, as Councillor Mills says, within the organisation. But I was going to go, I got it wrong. I thought you were going to go with consumer rather than customer. But it shows how language is powerful, right? It completely can fundamentally change how we view things. And the other thing I would say as well, because literally yesterday I had a resident ring me because the phone voice recognition, they said they were struggling with and things to get through. So I think we ought to bear in mind that as well, that I think AI is something that in certain circumstances can be, I'm not adverse to using it. I think that is how we get efficiencies and improve things. And actually, although rightly or wrongly, I think it will completely change the job market. I think jobs will change and they will go because of it, and that's just the reality. But what struck me was what Councillor Drew said in relation to training. I think I didn't read through the report or didn't catch sort of a sense of, is not just the training for those people that are responsible for it, I think everybody needs to understand, and going back to Councillor Richard Williams' point, about how it is being used and how it can be used effectively or not. And that made me look back at the staffing employment meeting we had recently, where it said, it gave the list of sort of the learning and development sessions that the people team are providing. Now, some of it, I'll be honest, I'm confused about. I don't know why we are giving effective tax planning for higher earners training to our staff, given that we are an authority that is reliant on collecting tax, and maybe have to declare an interest as an accountant. But there are some things like the co-pilot training and other things that could be more appropriate. But when I look at sort of the uptake, it's really not there. I mean, we've got, what should we say, like over 700 member staff, 750, and only 30 sort of attendees. So for me, one thing that sort of we need to really stress is the importance of everybody understanding how AI is being used throughout the authority to make sure it's effective. And things like the information and cyber security training that's available, some things like 30 minutes, others are just 10. And I think it's good to have that option, but unless everybody understands how it's being used, it will never be used effectively. And I think that's a key thing that if I can ask officers to take that away and look at when things are being progressed. I say AI can be good, but it must be responsible, and we can never have a situation where those residents or taxpayers don't have access to humans. And councillors, I'm sorry, I was not elected to become a professional form filler. I'm an accountant. We fill in enough forms there as a day job. And I find it incredibly frustrating that the culture of the council can sort of stem very close to the line of a little bit of a computer says no or yes if we keep being so reliant on forms.
Okay, Councillor Mills.
Councillor Williams raises some valid points, and one of the things as a former IT professional was giving customers who had a choice some new technology, and for 80% of the time they only used 20% of the capabilities because they weren't interested, or and there was a vast difference between customer A and customer B. One would take on board and want to do more and more and more and become more efficient, and the other one would stick to their old ways of doing things. So that's a frustration that all organisations recognise. So you'll offer training and get a very little uptake, for example, but we find some difficulty occasionally in our environment of committees where we have to have training to be able to sit on those committees. It's obligatory, but for staff that's not something that you would easily do. So, but it is important, I think, and particularly with the pace of adoption of AI tools and AI more generally, that our staff are as well informed as absolutely possible about not only the potential in AI, but the potential dangers arising out of its use.
Thank you for that. Councillor Heather Williams, did you have anything to add, just briefly? So we can move
yes,
on.
and if the communication plan to get people to those trainings as well could be looked at. And perhaps, in light of what I said, perhaps the appropriateness of some of the training that we're offering, I say effective tax planning for higher earners shouldn't really be given. You know, if people want to get that advice, there are professionals out there. I don't think that should be part of our training plan.
Councillor Mills? I think Councillor Mills has noted, yeah, lovely. Thank you for that. So I think we have done what we've been asked to do and reviewed this item and asked questions, made suggestions. So is everybody happy that we've done that? Councillor Bradnam.
Can I just check? We've taken on board the request from Councillor Bear Park to include that analysis of how we ensure safety.
Yeah, so we've noted sort of recommendations as we've been going along, and so, sorry.
We'll include it in future reports, yes. Again, this one isn't going on to Cabinet. So
Yeah.
this ends here.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 5, 3C ICT Year 1 Audit, pages 11 to 52. We'll start with Councillor Drew. Lovely.
Hello. Before we get into the great detail of the report, I would just like a sort of a sense really of maybe 3, 5 absolutely key things that we as councillors should take away from this report, which show the impact in this first year of this work. Because I think reading through the report, there is so much in there that is really strong. It's also very honest. There are bits where clearly you're picking up, we could have done that. But actually, I take from this report a real sense of, do you know what, there's a lot of really good stuff in here. And I think before we kind of move through to questions, that's why I've jumped in straight away. I thought maybe you could just give us 3, 5, whatever number. Sorry, I always look over here because I know that Councillor Milnes is going to defer to you. I'll look at Councillor Milnes first so he can defer. Just 3, 5 things that you think are the things, I don't know, that you're most proud of in the first year.
I'll hand over to Simon Oliver in a moment, but I think one of the things that you might recall, if you were here 8 years ago when we took over the administration and the IT system was in a much less strong place than we are now. And there were a range of legacy requirements, I recall, across the councils. We had outages, some of which were quite significant. And we made progress in our first 4 years to improve that situation, to get to a situation where we had a stable, very high availability, a much improved availability of our IT systems. But clearly, the following years, so 2025 was the end of the 3C contract, and we had to consider what we were now wanting to do to actually make advances from where we were. And we commissioned an independent report, which came forward with recommendations, which is why we got to a state where Simon Oliver was appointed as our Chief Digital Information Officer. And that marked a sea change, a step change in our approach to IT. And this audit report that you've got for the first 12 months of that speaks very well, and particularly in light of the extra burden that our whole staff here have had to take with local government reorganisation. Although there are sections of the waves of introduction of new technology that have not yet been undertaken, I think this has been an entirely justified way of moving forward over the last year. So with that commentation, I shall pass over to Simon, who is our Chief Digital Information Officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's fair to say that the level of dissatisfaction with the IT service had hit a particular low or high point, how you measure it. Relationships were fractured. There was serious consideration about what do we do with IT in 12 months, hence the report and hence the criteria that was set to achieve. My main achievement, the thing I'm proudest of, is the reset of relationships between the 3C ICT service and the councils and the senior officers. We have a much more open, honest, transparent relationship. I think the report reflects that. I'm not trying to make everything green and everything's perfect. We're not in that world. But we have rebuilt the trust and the confidence that when you get given an answer, the answer is true and honest and it's evidenced. I'm proud of the fact that we have got the councils in a better state of readiness for LGR than you would have had otherwise. I think, fortunate or not, I started on the same day that the white paper was released. So my role has always had LGR as part of it, not oh, this is something that's coming down the line. And I think that was fortunate that that happened, but it has put you in a better stead as well. And the fact that we changed the remediation programme to take account of that, rather than just blindly continuing on a path set in 2024 that may not have met. And so for me, absolutely, this is about the trust, the confidence, the improved relationships, and the fact we've been able to move beyond what was in that initial 12-month target. We've achieved much more. It's very difficult for me to speak about myself in the third person, but I do believe having a CDIO, somebody with the experience of working across numbers of authorities, with peer networks into the vendors and other peer authorities, to be able to provide experience of having done things before has stopped us taking some false path. I think it's enabled some improved mentoring to key staff. I think a number of staff across all three authorities have started to blossom because they have that support now, which they didn't have before. And the nature of my role means I think my predecessor was very much seen as a 3C person. I am much more seen as a CDIO of each organisation representing your needs, who also has the 3C role. And Liz will attest the fact that sometimes I have to argue with myself in meetings saying, with this hat on, I'd say this, and with this hat on, I'd say this. But again, it's open, it's honest, it's truthful. So I do think that the IT service is improving, but it's also adding real benefit to officers in the three partner organisations as well. And I think Sonia sat here is a fantastic example of that, as somebody who has really developed well and is really maturing and delivering a fantastic service. And I'd like to think that I've had a bit of a hand in that and in that guidance. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. I have no doubt that councillor colleagues will ask you trickier questions over the next however long, and I have a few myself, but I just wanted to give the opportunity for us to recognise, to begin with, the significant progress that has been made. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Drew. I think I will go next just with one question, and I'll come on to Councillor Richard Williams. So where we're talking the report about the surveys that we've done essentially, and that there seemed to be quite a big discrepancy between 24 and 25 in terms of how many responses there were to those surveys. I think it had gone down from 552 to 138 or something, which is quite a lot. Did you want to comment on how you might envisage that improving, or why that was in the report? Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, I'll go first, because we did have this conversation earlier this week, exactly on that point, that the response rates were, in absolute terms, quite low, which could be a good sign that people aren't worried by IT in the same way that they have done previously. But clearly the baseline figure was created, so it was only reasonable to do another survey with the same question, so you got a direct comparison. But we've talked about the next time being something different, and one of the things that I noted was, one of the questions I think was, how do you feel about IT security? Well, I'm not really sure how we would expect the average user to know how to assess how IT security was being dealt with. So there will be some significant changes to the next time we do this, I'm sure. So Simon, I don't know what you want to add.
Simon.
Yeah, I would reiterate that when the original survey was undertaken, it was in a situation where we had councils with dissatisfaction, and so there was a real push for colleagues to respond and air their dissatisfaction, and that push wasn't there this time. It wasn't undertaken in that way. So yes, the numbers have dropped, but I think the percentiles are reflective of sentiment. I think that there's a correlation between quantitative and qualitative responses. What I would also say is that where somebody has given a score, they were also given the opportunity to write down the reason for that score. And they were also offered a chance to give us the top 3 frustrations with the IT service. So whilst the questions like for like and weren't, what we have done is the ICT management team have been through absolutely every single one of those, line by line by line. We have taken it on board. Some of it was hard reading, some of it wasn't. And we are reacting to that. So as part of our wider response to our remediation year and next steps, we're also baking in those responses as well. So it was a good exercise. I personally think it backs up the sentiments of officers and members in relation to an improved service, but we accept there's more to do. I think I'm taking it as a lower response is a vote of confidence, if I'm being honest, but I would.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Okay. And then just very briefly on a second point, on page 14, paragraph 42, I think it was, where we talk about sort of some cultural issues remaining. I suppose I just wasn't quite clear on that paragraph. I just didn't really understand it very well. What was it talking about specifically? Does it mean sort of behavioural or structural things or leadership things? I suppose I just didn't really understand it. Yeah, in truth.
I don't want to go into too much detail. I think the way I would describe it is obviously we had an IT service that was not performant, and that non-performance is across both people, technology and process. We are working well with process change. We are undertaking technology change. However, there is a mixed response to the culture change piece. And what I mean by that is we may have people who've been operating a certain way for a very long time, who perhaps haven't quite bought into some of the changes needed, and a bit more work is needed to mentor and bring those people forward. I only reference it in light touch terms because I just wanted to be open and honest that we're not all there yet. There's still work to do, but I don't see that as a particular definite problem. I just want to be open that we are working through challenges and will continue to do so.
Thank you for that. Councillor Richard Williams, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just pick up on a few points. I'm just going back to the 2025 responses. Obviously, we've already talked about the fact they're down. I think they became very skewed as well, so it became very South Cambs focused. So, the drop-off in Cambridge City was huge, and in Hunts as well. In South Cambs, actually not so much. So as well as it going down, it became more unrepresentative in a sense of across the 3 councils. I mean, I just wondered on that point. I know this is not terribly scientific, but if just sending around to staff a quick one-liner, has your IT service improved, yes or no, in the last 12 months, you might get you might get some useful data out of that actually, rather than just people having a 15-word questionnaire they don't answer at all. Even if you just capture one small thing, might be quite useful just to get a view of how it's going. I mean, obviously it all looks that was mentioned, and I think obviously that's a huge issue potentially coming down the road at us. Slightly depends how the councils are reconfigured. If it's option E, it might be a bit easier because you can actually carry on with Hunts and what is going to be Greater Cambridge because they'll be independent. If it's not, it's going to be difficult because we're going to have to split this up. So it would be useful to sort of know a little bit more about how we're preparing for that so that if it happens, we don't end up going, or minimise the extent to which actually, the disruption caused by breaking the service up impacts on service and takes us back to a worse place. And then my final point is, it's going to sound a bit negative, and it's not a point about officers, because this is not actually what the officers wrote, but I have to say, I found the report from the consultants impenetrable, full of the most impenetrable jargon. So, you know, for example, in finding and implications, it says the partner councils have a CDO program established to direct response to the triple value impact review. You know, I read it all and I didn't feel at the end of it much the wiser as to what it was actually talking about. So I know that's an external report. I know it's a technical area, but I think maybe we can try and draw out in language that most people understand actually what's happened and what's changed and what's been done, because I found a lot of the jargon just left me none the wiser.
Councillor Brian Mills.
Yeah, so with regards to that last statement, particularly in the IT field where terminology is really quite esoteric, isn't it? It's, and also there's a train of reports that historically go behind this. So the independent report that we got from, sorry, was it TVI? Thank you, get my TLO in the right order. Was a very important part of that, and I don't think you've had sight of that. But that's another 120 pages of report or something. So, but because those of us that were involved in it, we see a movement from one to the next, and it's easier to understand then. So that's probably one of the things that we could have given you more material, but I think what you're asking for is something less impenetrable. So it's a dilemma, isn't it? You know, the management summary from that audit, I think, is the key part for us to rely on for you as a committee. I'm certainly left happy by a third-party report that doesn't give us a completely clean bill of health, but it looks as though we're making progress across the piece in this delivery of our service. I think we're in a better place than we ever have been certainly in our administration in the last 8 years. Although I understand the sentiment behind it, I think asking by email for whether we're doing well or not is not really a viable option. I think we will continue to probe and look for candour in answers. I think one of the things that Simon has referred to is an increased transparency and candour in our dealings, so that we're not pretending we're giving better service than we are, for example, and underneath, you know, the grimace of something not working again, but we can be have more freedom to admit our failings and do something about them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Simon, did you want to come in briefly on these points?
Sure. So we automatically, after anybody raises a support call with us, we always ask for feedback. Every single piece of feedback that is given, I review on a weekly basis. So everybody has an opportunity after an interaction in relation to a support call, I need help. So we look at those. In direct response to some of the are known, we knew we had some things to change, but also in relation to the survey, we've set up a new programme of work which is focused on the user experience. We are undertaking a significant amount of activity to improve things. We are making sure that we're putting out comms onto the intranet that people can see, very open style. And once that work has been furthered, we will go back out and say, have you seen the improvements that we expect? Just to get that feedback loop, we will check. So we are very much want to get that, you know, that sense of how it feels. But at the moment, we know there's some issues. Let's get some things underway, and then let's just double check whether our colleagues are feeling the same that we expect them to be. The work that we've delivered so far has had a very positive impact, so we are comfortable we're on the right path.
Councillor Mills?
You may want to comment to it, but the LGR issue I didn't respond to, and at the LGA conference this year there was quite a lot of sessions from people who'd already been through this unitarisation process. And it highlighted how important ICT services were to that process. And I know Simon's already been doing quite a lot of work on there, but it's absolutely critical. It is rather dependent on the choices that the government are now going to make in terms of the orientation of new councils. But I think at least I have some confidence that we're on that case and working to make sure we try and avoid some of the pitfalls that other unitary councils in their formation have suffered.
Thank you for that. Councillor Williams, are you happy with that? Is that, yeah? Councillor Hobro, did you have something on this? Yeah.
I had a question which is kind of a follow-up to Councillor Williams' question.
Okay,
if I
yeah,
may, but
we'll take
jump
it
the
now and
queue
then I'll
if I'm
come
not
to
supposed
Councillor Bradnam. Yeah, please, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So I wanted to comment that our internal report here I found very, very readable. Like Councillor Richard Williams, I tried to understand the report from RSM, and I think it's deeply ironic that their tagline on the front page is "the power of being understood." Because, and I don't think it's IT jargon, I think it's management speak. And in particular, I think page 22, which is the summary of management actions, I found almost impossible to understand. So I wondered if we might have a summary from officers of their interpretation of what page 22 means, beyond the fact that we're going to recruit a customer experience manager, which I thought was clear in there. But it seems to me that it's quite important to understand what management actions they're recommending. And I found this page impenetrable. Yeah, I got from it that they want us to recruit a customer experience manager, but beyond that, I wondered if it could be demystified, perhaps. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Jeff Membry. Sorry, Simon.
I think
yeah.
I was suggesting Simon Oliver might answer.
Lovely, Simon.
Yes, so as you can imagine, RSM had a wealth of material to trudge through to come out with the findings. The key real findings are that a significant amount of work was planned to be undertaken during that remediation year to hit the success criteria. In addition, new things came along, LGR, etc., within the year that changed the nature of the remediation programme. And some things within that remediation programme were delayed, didn't get completed by the end of the calendar December year. That hard cut off, which was the point that we said we would take a external review and audit. So what it's essentially saying is we have a restructure of our leadership team that is currently in flight, and we should complete that and employ the people that we say we need to make that happen. It talks about, in terms of the feedback from the customer survey, that the dissatisfaction that has been raised in the written comments, etc., we should take seriously and come up with a plan to achieve and resolve those, which is our customer experience programme that we're just setting up now and will be subject to my service director's review and management to see through. And then the third bit is that there are some activities from the remediation programme itself that didn't get completed, and they believe that what we should do is set up a further bit of programme to document exactly what is left and how long it should take and be held to account to deliver that. As per my cover report, I don't think that's helpful for two reasons. One, I think calling the IT service to still be in remediation is a bit of disservice to how far they've come and how far colleagues in the IT service, how hard they've worked and how much change has happened. We accept that there's still work to do, but I don't think it's a remediation programme now. So what we're looking to do is split that into two. So where we can, we'll move that into operational activity. So recruiting to a structure is more of an operational activity now than something that needs to be tracked as a remediation. Also, some of the activities are in relation to LGR. So we're looking to where it's an LGR related activity, we'll move it into an LGR framework and cover it as part of that. And actually, there's very little of significant residual work that really needs a spotlight on it under a special programme. What we are committing to do is making sure that absolutely everything that still needs to be done has another home and is being monitored. It's part of the quarterly reporting we do to the 3C shared board. It's part of the ongoing reporting we do to the service directors. So all I'm saying is I don't want to do it their way because I don't think it's the right thing to do, but we aren't going to drop anything. And so their report essentially says the things you've not done, be held to account for. The things that your colleagues and customers, I can call them customers, have raised, you take those into heart and you act against them, which we are doing. But that's essentially the report.
Councillor Braddon?
So Councillor Hobro took some of my questions, and actually what I observe is that the decision to engage the CDIO was justified by his explanation just now, because the report, as we've all said, I've seen this in other fora, particularly in audit. Auditors speak a different language. That doesn't mean to say we should let them get away with it. I do actually think that, like, reports that come to, or used to come to the corporate parenting committee at the council, like this, I absolutely understand, and I'm very grateful for Simon's explanation, but I don't think we should let our auditors get away with talking in language that's less than understandable by the average human being who might be reading these papers. I'm being courteous here. So actually, as Councillor Brian Milnes has said, what we have got is a summary that says these are medium risk. Timely management attention is necessary. I'm eternally grateful to Simon Oliver for explaining that he doesn't agree with the actual way they're proposing to do it, and he's suggesting a different way of achieving the same end that gives more credit to our IT staff for what they're already doing. But what I also, my feeling is that I think, thank heavens we've got a CDIO who's actually overseeing this and understanding what the audit report means and understanding what it means for us as a council. And so for my money, this means it was a good decision to take on such a person to do this for us. So another comment is the other reason why this is a really good idea, and thank you for the fact that your report was absolutely understandable, is it will assist us to have the confidence not to be over worried about things we don't need to be worried about, because you understand the things that we are doing to make sure that this council remains safe in the digital world, in this and in the other respects that we come to later on in the agenda. So what I wanted to come to as well was that same report about the number of respondents, which is on page 32, which, as others have pointed out, significantly less. But my attention was drawn to the comment on the right-hand side of the page, which said there were lower numbers of respondents, and a lower response rate could indicate a less opinionated view of the service. Now, that might sound a bit mean of the auditors, who I presume wrote this report, because when you look up the definition of opinionated, it means a stubborn belief and a disbelief in something. What this process has done has given us an enormous amount more trust in the process. And Simon, I'm so glad that you said the thing that you were most proud of is that we've achieved a much more trusting, honest, open relationship with the IT service, because I'm long enough in service to know that the situation that we had before, there was a great deal of mistrust. And actually this process, this remediation process, engaging the CDIO and engaging in a really positive way with IT is putting us in a much, much stronger position at a time when we as a council know that we are under constant threat of hacking and all sorts of other stuff. So I think this is a very reassuring report. If we can get the auditors to put a 7-year-old's interpretation of their action points, that would be great. I'm also speaking as someone, in the comments that were raised, some work is needed to engage with some who are not there yet. I think that was Councillor Williams's explanation, and that's fine. I think I'm one of those who I'm not there yet. But what I want to be sure of as a councillor is that this council is taking the right steps to make sure that we are safe in our IT sphere, and that we're taking on people who do understand that process and are taking the steps for us and are advising us appropriately, and that we have somebody who can interpret their advice for us. So this to me is
seeing a lot of nodding,
an excellent report.
I'm assuming that is the case. Yeah.
Yes.
Simon, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the kind words. I agree, RSM and their document, I will go back and I will challenge them on the language. One of the challenges that we have is that RSM are the internal audit partner of HDC, and as a HDC sponsored service, that was so it's not your audit, it is HDC, and I'll pass that back. But I agree that the language isn't the best.
I think particularly in the action points, that the members of the colleagues here need to understand what it is they are being required to do, by when. They need to be smart objectives, as it were, in a broad sense. So I'm sure you're on it.
So my commitment is that the actions I take next on the back of those audit actions, which we would have done anyway, they were already in train. This was more of an assurance exercise. That will be done through the governance mechanisms of 3C. The other thing I'd just like to raise as well is you notice that some of the numbers drops for HDC. That is because the IT team were told they were not allowed to respond to the audit, which is why HDC's figures are more proportionally impacted. But again, I just wanted it to be honest. I didn't want it to be skewed by the IT staff. So again, it's that openness and transparent. I think technology is relatively straightforward, but I think that it's very easy for technology people to hide behind complex themes and big words. And I hope to be seen as somebody who doesn't do that. I don't feel the need to talk in a language and use terminology that is unnecessary. And I can absolutely give members assurance that I give a robust challenge to officers and leadership where I feel that something's not being missed. And I have to say that on every occasion I have done so, that has been taken within the sentiment it's deserved. It's been listened to. I've not been shut down. I've not been ignored. We've had good conversations, and we've moved from a situation where the computer said no to more of the computer says maybe. What are we trying to achieve? Maybe there's a different way of doing it that would give you the same outcome. And so it's a much better dialogue. And as I say, that's meant that both sides, myself understanding the council, but also the council understanding the concerns of IT and the assurance needed, to both build up a rapport. And so it's worked. It's a real two-way street. And so yes, absolutely, I have a very good leadership team here who respond really well to challenge.
Thank you for that. So I think that's given us clarity on that. Councillor Libby Earle.
Yes, thank you. I was also looking at the number of responses to this audit and the questionnaire, which was relatively, as questionnaires go, 18 questions isn't hugely challenging. They were multiple choice, presumably. Just it was quite low, even in the beginning, when people were being asked at the very beginning of this, maximum of 34% response from Huntingdon, then 20 and 25. But the second year, people just didn't seem to engage with it. Those that did, which was, it's great, really useful information. But considering how important IT is to the work of everyone in this council and to our residents, and the variety of workplaces where people are actually accessing IT and needing to use systems in the building, some of them working from home, some of them working on the hoof, even councillors working in this building. I'm just wondering how, in the future, we're going to make sure that we have a higher engagement with IT issues and you get feedback from more people. Now, it may well be that satisfied customers don't fill in questionnaires and they just say, well, it's all right. But that perhaps isn't good enough. We actually need to know that positive information from people who are happy, as well as perhaps the ones who are less happy. So, where do we go from here for 2026 to get a better engaged looking response from, between 600 and 800 people per council, certainly 600, nearly 700 here.
Councillor Mills.
Well, apart from being mindful about the number of consultations we're invited to respond to on a more wider scale in this environment, we already spoke about the relatively low numbers that Councillor Earl referred to. And clearly we would want a bigger response to another exercise of a similar nature that didn't have to go back to the original as a baseline. So I think we've already heard that we're planning on doing that. I think the other thing to add to this is anecdotally, the number of complaints that we get as councillors or make as councillors has diminished radically. Never would a week go by without me hearing 2 or 3 complaints from colleagues, both in the staff and amongst members. Yeah, that it's not like that anymore. The environment is way improved. So we can have some assurance from that anecdotally, but if Simon wants to say again just some more about future engagement.
I think because we've made, like you say, we've made the point about, I think it's been noted what Councillor Earl has said about the importance of uptaking those surveys and anything that we can do to encourage that in the future, given the importance of the service. So I think we'll leave it as that, given that are you happy that's been covered, Councillor Earl?
Just one more thing, which I'm sure is easy to answer. One of the things that's come up in the answers to question 13 on pages 15 and 16, the area that seems to have been needing improvement across the board is connectivity, and that's stayed orange overall, and certainly in Huntingdonshire, and pale green for us. I'm just wondering, is there an issue with Wi-Fi, VPN, etc., and are we fixing it?
Simon.
The simple answer is yes.
Okay.
So, as we've been undertaking remediation activity, we've been, lifting up the rocks. We're seeing what's underneath there. We are working through a legacy set of issues. We've hit a bit of a point where a number of issues are crashing together at the same time to give an amplified detrimental experience to some colleagues. In fact, we've changed Wi-Fi provider and network provider, and there are some teething issues with those. It's a contract that we utilise regionally outside the Cambridgeshire Peterborough region. We have some device performance issues on the laptops. We have some applications which aren't hosted in the best way to make them responsive. So the customer experience program that we've set up is to bring all of that together, give it the priority it needs, make sure we've got the right engineers doing the right thing. We've brought in a new interim member of staff into the leadership with particular skills in this area to bolster our ability to handle that. And so what we have done, we have rolled out new antivirus. That's being rolled out at the moment. We're about halfway through. People who have received that, their laptops have sprung to life. It's a much better solution. We are replacing our connectivity software that's on the laptops. Again, I haven't got it yet. Anecdotally, those who have got it and trialled it, that is also giving another performance boost. That, once we've got all the antivirus done, that'll be the second wave that's coming. We are undertaking a number of diagnoses with our partners and with the councils that also use the same technology we do in our Wi-Fi network. That is improving. It's not where it needs to be, but it's significantly improved. And we're also undertaking some design work around our network to ensure the network is as efficient as it possibly can be. There's some legacy configurations in there. So the simple answer is, yes, we have problems. The longer answer is we know what they are. We're working through them in a controlled way. We're going to get them fixed once and for all. But once they're fixed, we can move on. Because the legacy sticking plaster on top of sticking plaster type of approach that's been taken has just run out now, and that's why we're having to do it. It's really unfortunate it all came at the same time, because we would have managed all this. It was all planned for. It's just all concatenated, unfortunately. Okay. But yes, we're on it. And as I say, once we've got that work completed, we'll go back out to users and say, does it feel different? And if people say yes.
I think we've got that, that reassurance, that it's being dealt with, Councillor Earle, yeah.
Yep, no, that's fine, especially having suffered at the hands of remote access desktops myself.
There we go.
I could pick that one up. It may be an issue for people working remotely.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Councillor Paul Bearpark.
Just a couple of quick questions, just on the management actions. So in the report, it says the responsible owner is TBC. And I was also wondering, who is that? And the other thing is there a plan to come back with a report on the achievement of those management actions or not?
Lovely. If we just keep our questions and answers fairly concise. Simon.
The responsible officer is myself. I'm not planning to do a specific feedback, but I'm more than happy to do, perhaps, once we've got this remediation work done, we've ran another set of questionnaires. I think that would be a good time, and we can also check on progress on those activities that have been called. So absolutely, yes, I would say sort of 3 months' time would be a really good point to put a stake in the ground and reassess where we are.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Bearpark, did you have anything else?
No, nothing else, thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor James Howbrain.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 quick questions. Firstly, I'd like to comment that the survey results are clearly very encouraging, and you've broken them down by council in places. Has it been analysed in other groupings, such as by user category, by which I mean so members versus officers, or people in more of an office scenario, and I realise that includes working from home, versus people who are on the move, because their experiences might be very different. And just as an example, I do my council business on my own laptop, so the way I connect to the systems will be different from someone who's using an ICT-provided device. So is there a breakdown in that sort of category? Did you try breaking the results down in those categories? And if so, was it useful?
The simple answer is we didn't. But what we have been able to do, because we have the written questions of why did you give that and what are your top 10, we have been able to kind of ascertain where the points of concern are, and we can actually see that some groups, so not scientifically, but anecdotally, yes.
Okay.
Councillor Howbrow.
Thank you. And just very briefly, finally, I think this whole survey was an email-based survey, wasn't it? I think it was sent out by email requesting responses. So I suppose another way to gather data would be actually to approach a selection of people in these different situations. A lot of us get a lot of email and kind of brush off some emails in favour of the ones that look really, really urgent. And it just occurred to me that there are other ways of gathering data that might probe into corners that the email-based survey might not reach.
Thank you for that.
I agree. We ask for email responses. We also put links onto the intranet. I think there is a learning here, and as I say, I think one of the things I'd like to do is, when we are a bit more advanced, I would like to go to a town hall, do a "you said we did" type presentation to get those, to make sure that we're standing up in front of our users and being seen, and also then launch that so colleagues feel, actually I've got something I want to say, whether that's positive or negative, but again champion that. But I do believe that one of the key findings was that IT can be a bit distant in terms of that what's going on heartbeat. So I accept that, and that's something we can put in place quite quickly. And we've always had an open invite to attend and present.
Councillor Howbrow.
Thank you. That's really good. I mean, finally, I'd just comment that if anything, the bias will probably be in the email approach will probably be towards people who've got something to complain about. So that's good, right? And you commented on this in the results. So I think the comments are probably perfectly valid. I just think it's worth considering other methods, perhaps. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So I don't have any other speakers on this item, so I think we have done what the recommendation suggests, and that we've asked questions and been through the report thoroughly. Is everybody happy that we've done that? Lovely, thank you. So what I was going to propose next is that we come on to agenda item 8, the cyber security update, pages 53 to 60. Thank you.
Briefly, do you want to cover the date of the next meeting in case we need to go into confidential session?
I will do at the end, but yeah, thank you, Councillor Bradman. So I propose that we go on to item 8, and I have taken advice from officers around this agenda item that we can go into it in open session, but if there are questions that require more information, officers will indicate that to me, and we will then go into closed session. Is everybody happy with that? I'm more than happy to take it into closed session if we need to.
Agreed.
Agreed?
Well,
lovely.
That was only my voice.
Yeah? Okay. So at that point, we will now take item 8, pages 53 to 60. I mean, my personal comments on this, it was a very good report, and what it does is ensure this council is kept safe from external threats, essentially. Did anybody else have any other questions on this? I thought it was pretty clear what the intention of it was. Councillor Howbrow.
Thank you. I agree with your comments. I think it's a really thorough overview, especially in terms of the management responsibilities and the structural picture. So I had just a couple of very specific questions. The first is a question about IT security philosophy, and I suppose I'm looking for some reassurance here. So some measures that improve IT security end up trading off the desire for extra security against extra inconvenience. Other measures bundle extra security with extra convenience. So a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. I'm very much in favour of the second and not the first. And I just wondered what the philosophy was behind this, whether there is a focus on that second approach above the first. I think there's a big risk with the first approach that the measures become ineffective or have adverse effects. So I just wondered
Yeah, not an
thinking
easy
was-
balance, that one. Councillor Mills.
An interesting question about the philosophy behind IT security. And often, as Councillor Hobro has alluded to, it is seen as some inhibitor, or a layer of restrictive action on people doing their work. But in truth, IT security is a system enabler. It's the exact opposite of that commonly held view. Because without a good security philosophy and action to back that up, you're vulnerable, and availability is key to this. And we see elsewhere in local government and in organisations, Jaguar Rover, I think there's one of them, wasn't it, recently, who lost massive amounts of time and money because of a failure of their security system. As a sometime practitioner, I can commend this report and the activities that we've got behind them. Clearly, we're not going to go into a lot of detail in there, but I'm happy that we're going in the right direction, and Simon might want to say more.
Thank you for that. Simon, did you want to add anything to that?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to say that I'm a standard user. I have a standard laptop. I have the same security profiles that you all work with. I work within the same constraints. And I will say that when I arrived, it was probably one of the most frustrating experiences I've ever had. The security was overzealous. These systems were not linked. And the users were exposed to a number of problems with the IT service. An example would be that your connectivity software would need a password reset, so you'd reset that, and then your Office would stop working because it was on your old password. Then you'd have to reboot it, and then something else would happen. And it was a journey of discovery. The role of security is to put in the correct guardrails so people can't do harm. It should be as invisible as possible, and it should allow you to do your work. So the philosophy that we have is we are taking away as much of the technical pain and the disjoints between our systems that as we can do. We've made investments in technologies and we're changing technologies to enable that to happen. So it'll be a much more seamless experience and much more less intrusive. We're also taking advantage of changing approaches to security. So, the days of you have to have a 37-character password with X, Y, and Z, and it changes so often, we can be slightly more relaxed because we're utilising two-factor, multi-factor authentication, which allows you to do things differently. So again, putting the new technology and new methods in also has a user experience benefit as well. We also want to make sure that the guardrails are appropriate, and we have a much stronger feedback loop now for people to challenge. It would be really helpful in my job if I were able to ... and we can work around what options are available and have a conversation and be challenged. Whereas I think historically we'd have just put up, this is how we do it, full stop. So I think the culture of the organisation, the technology we're putting in, and a very much more user-centric approach is having a positive impact. It's not there yet. There are still areas of frustration, and colleagues will all be able to cite them, but it's a much improving picture and one that we are continuing with.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hobro. Yeah.
So that's a really reassuring answer. Thank you very much for that. I'm very reassured by the philosophy. I hope you don't mind me asking a question about philosophy because it was at a kind of higher level than the report was presented. But so my second question was about one of the specific issues mentioned in the report. So it referred to two attacks that have occurred on other councils. One was the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. The other was Hackney Borough Council. So my question is, what have we learned from the details of those hacks? And are we happy that the kind of attacks that we saw in those instances would not succeed on us.
Simon, I'll come to you in the first. Yeah.
Yes, the local government arena are very open behind closed doors about what's happening. So when somebody has an incident, they make sure everybody else is aware. And the part of the wash-up, everybody gets to see the findings. We also have very strong connections into the National Cybersecurity Centre as well, and they do the findings as well and give us key insights. So we're hooked into that network. There's a local WARP, which I can never remember the name of, but it's around warnings and advice on a regional basis. So we're plugged into that. The reason I highlighted those two particular examples, because they both have a relevance to the situation here. So Hackney were subject to a ransomware attack. It was a particularly impactful attack for them. They were out for a number of years. It was very high cost, and it was very highly reputationally damaging. So this was to try and reflect, if you are hit by something, it's not just the immediacy of it, it's also how you can react to it and react in the right way. I was at the helm of an organisation that was unfortunately by a ransomware attack. I hasten to add that the ICO and the cyber fraud police all said we were unfortunate rather than negligent. So it does happen, but that ability to act quickly and resolve rather than being in a situation where it's ongoing and you're not able to. So I thought it was a good example of what happens when things go wrong. RBKC is interesting because it was a shared service that had actually decided to repatriate their services. One of the councils didn't realise that they were still connected into the old shared service. So again, this is just to highlight that as a shared service, we are as strong as our weakest partner, and we all have to work together and make sure that we're all doing the right things. And to get to that end, we have a very active information assurance group where the three CIROs, the three information risk owners, are together and do work hand in hand and collaboratively. So that shouldn't be a situation here, but again, that's why I raised those two. So yes, we are fully aware of what everybody else is happening. We react to those as wider telemetrics across the private sector and do the learning from those, absolutely. But I thought they were particularly good examples just to bring things to light.
Thank you for that. Councillor Howbray?
That's also a very reassuring answer. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bradnam?
Councillor Hobro asked the question I was going to ask, so
No
thank you for
problem.
your very full response.
We'll move on. Councillor Richard Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Mine may need to go into private session, so just feel free to postpone it if it does. But I wanted to ask about something slightly different, but I wanted to ask about contingency plans, which is obviously related to cybersecurity. Obviously, we want to prevent problems arising, but I wanted to ask what happens if problems do arise? What are our backup strategies?
Simon, can you take that? If there is additional information required, I'm sure we can do it in a written form, but yeah.
There's nothing secret here. So effectively, we have both technical and non-technical controls. So we would, in the event of something happening, obviously our first protocol is to restrict, stop that from happening and stop spread and being able to understand. And we have systems and technologies in place to allow us to do that quickly. We would then seek to invoke the council's BCP arrangements, their business continuity planning, so that they are able to continue to work the best they can within those arrangements. We have a list of all the critical services in each council and a plan of how we would recover those services and in what order they need to be recovered in, so that we have that ready. So we're not thinking, oh my God, what do we need to do? We go, right, where's the plan? Here's how we do it. That's how we go back in order. Huge amount of that is around communication. So BCP will often depend on the temporal kind of aspect. So if you think it's going to be out for a couple of hours, it's a very different answer than if you think you're going to be out for 2 weeks, 2 months, etc. So again, communications and putting those emergency responses in place, and other councils have very good emergency responses to do that. It's normally an external, but also for internal. So we have a lot of planning, we have a lot of data, we have a lot of information to put us in good stead. What we should be doing is testing those on a regular basis. I will confess we haven't tested our disaster recovery for a while, but we have tested our backups, and if our systems got infected, could we recover from our backups effectively in a reasonable timescale? Those have been tested, so we have reasonable assurance. But yeah, we have plans in place so that if the worst happened, we could press the right buttons, undertake the right activities to respond in the right way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Councillor Richard Williams is happy with that response, so thank you for that, Simon. I don't have any other speakers on this item, so if we're all happy. Councillor Howbray?
So would you mind if I ask another one?
Yeah.
It's a bit technical, and I hope it's okay. So one of the main sort of, again, it's a sort of philosophy type thing, one of the main root causes of outages is the interdependence between different parts of systems. I'm thinking of things like the Facebook outage in 2021, where one part of a system goes down, it triggers a failing across the network. Sometimes these can be very hard to spot because it's not obvious that these interdependencies exist, but they can be designed out by minimizing interdependencies, and also by sort of doing an analysis that looks for possible chain reactions like that. I just wondered if this kind of thinking is sort of front and centre in the way that you're approaching our services. I realise that every new major outage like this is something slightly different from all the others. But I think there are some underlying principles to do with how dependent our systems are on one another, whether or not they're capable of recovering independently, that kind of thing. So I wondered if you could comment on that issue of interdependency and how resilient you feel we are to it.
Simon.
One of the challenges we have is that services are more and more delivered over the open internet. So we are reliant on the operability of the internet. Now, the internet was designed to be robust and survive a nuclear attack, but clearly on the outages that you see that are very public, that isn't now always the case. So we have no ability to really cater for those kind of internet failures, connectivity failures. However, we are able to bring staff into office, work from office locations, etc., in the event of that happening. But that is just simply out of our control. It's just the way the internet has been built and commoditized. In terms of our internal systems, there is a challenge. We are moving from disparate solutions that were all independent but caused a fragmented experience to our users to move to a more consolidated set of technologies, but they are more single vendor, single failure. So it is a balance. So I think the day-to-day user experience, operability, security, ability to bring engineers in who understand our technology quickly and it's more of a standard is a greater advantage than the risk of the short-term infrequent outages that it causes. But it's not a perfect science, so I've gone for usability over a lesser user experience. But that because if one piece falls out of the puzzle, the problem you have is the more that you engineer to allow for that redundancy, the more expensive and more complex it becomes, and therefore you bring in other challenges. So for me, it's simplicity of management, simplicity of usement, bringing costs down, and we take the heightened risk, although I don't think it is a particularly heightened risk to do so. And it's a model that is adopted by most organisations.
Thank you. Did you want to add something, Councillor Mills?
Just a couple of things to note. I probably referred to AI as an opportunity and a threat earlier. And one of the problems with AI is it's generating vulnerability attacks like we've never seen before, just in terms of sheer volume, because it's very easy for it to do. And zero-day threats are therefore more prominent as well. So we're in a heightened environment for security, and we saw back in 2024 an outage caused by a security firm nobody had heard of, CrowdStrike. I had to look it up because I couldn't remember what their name was. But this obscure company caused complete chaos on the internet and was a real problem for pretty much everybody for a short period, because many of our major suppliers were reliant on their services. So it's a very valid point that Councillor Holbrook brings up, and one that we have to show continued vigilance on to make sure we're addressing it properly.
That is the case, and yourself, Councillor Mills. Yeah, agreed.
Thank you very much. That's a really good answer. Thanks.
Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I don't actually, because I'm not a scrutiny member, I don't have the confidential papers, so there's no danger of me straying there. But given the current climate, and we do become more reliant, as everyone said, on these sorts of things, is it not sensible that when we have our reports, like we have the sort of financial implications, legal implications, we have equality implications, carbon implications on our reports when we're making decisions, perhaps we ought to have whether there is any issue with cybersecurity, just because there is so much in store, and the current climate and the world that we are actually living in right now, would it be sensible? Because as Councillor Bradnam sort of said earlier on about all of our natural sort of all of us are educated in different ways when it comes to technology. Some people feel very confident, some people less. That actually having that steer when we're making these decisions may be incredibly important, as we do have in other areas.
Simon.
That's an interesting point, and I think we can take that under consideration to have implications, IT security implications, whether or not that's something that we can put in place. Simon, I don't know whether you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of our standard assurance process, the way that we are set up so that anybody undertaking activity within the council, making proposals in the council, goes through a professional digital group that assesses that piece of work. If it's not an appropriate solution, we'll seek to alternatives. I'll be called in to bring a governance and assurance to that where necessary and provide professional advice and challenge to it. So, and I have a direct route to the Chief Executive if I had a particular concern. Everybody in the council has a direct route to the CIRO, who ultimately is the decision maker on anything that would cause cybersecurity issues. So I would think that anything that would be inherently risky being part of a proposal that members saw would be astonishingly unlikely, I would hope. But I am absolutely convinced that if there were concerns, they would form part of that report through this standard assurance that we would give. Absolutely, particularly when it's options appraisal type activities to explain why we're offsetting due to those concerns.
Thank you for that. Councillor Heather Williams.
And I say this with the a little tongue-in-cheek, but I've got access to raise my concerns with the Chief Exec. Doesn't necessarily mean that things are going to get actioned in that way, because people interpret risk in different ways. My point is, as councillors, we are making decisions on things every day, and if we have other things that we look through our reports that as they're written, we have a whole raft of things that are included as implications, because it's not just about your access to officers, it's about our ability to make responsible decision making. For so many reasons, this is a huge issue. And I'm just trying to find, we have, when it comes through on the implications, we have financial and fraud impact. Again, I would hope that there wouldn't be a negative fraud impact by what we're doing, but it's still on there. We have risks and opportunities, equality and diversity, climate change, health and well-being, on top of the consultation responses if they've been in play. And I think it'd be very important. Some of these things, probably cyber security is even higher because it would impact all these things. Sorry to make you sort of laugh, but I just feel like it's something. We talk about risks and opportunities. I appreciate what you're saying from your reports and the way they get filtered in, but as councillors, we don't have sight of that in our day-to-day decision makings, and we need to know if actually we're increasing a burden through a certain decision. It might be that a solution is achievable. I'm sure there are. But are we increasing burden on our cyber security, or are we not?
Councillor Milnes,
I was just going to say that there's already a section in there that covers risk. And we've identified in these reports that we've seen this evening where it sits on our risk assessment strategy. So I think that's the place for that sort of consideration to sit. And having been through a process with the responsible security officer as part of that process, we can put that as an addendum or an insert into that section.
Okay, that seems reasonable, I think. So, yeah, I think we'll leave it there. I think that's a reasonable proposal from Councillor Milnes. Do we have any other speakers on this item? No? Okay, so I think we have done what we've been asked to do and ask questions and scrutinise that report. Is everybody happy that we've done that? Okay, so then I'll come back to agenda item 6, which is to note the date of the next meeting, which is going to be on the 5th of March, which is a Thursday at 5:30. And that brings us to a close of the meeting. Thanks very much.